A woman's car broke down on a desolate road as a storm approached, leaving her completely stranded until a black crop duster pilot landed to help. After hearing the story behind her journey, the man risked everything to get her to her destination the next morning. His small plane was intercepted by an F-22 fighter jet, turning an ordinary rescue into an incredible story. The sun hung low over the sugarcane fields of Willow Creek, Louisiana, casting long golden streaks over the land. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth, a warning of the storm creeping in from the west. Elijah Carter gripped the control stick of his Piper Pawnee, its leather worn smooth from years of use, and guided it over the fields with practiced ease. This plane had been his for over 20 years, a workhorse that had kept him in the air long after most men his age had slowed down. He never had the chance to fly the jets he used to dream about as a kid, never made it past the family farm to something bigger, but the sky was still his. The radio crackled to life. "Eli, storm's coming in faster than expected. You should get your ass on the ground." Lewis never wasted words. Elijah exhaled, already angling toward his makeshift landing strip, but as he descended, something caught his eye. A silver Mercedes sat parked haphazardly on the dirt road, hazard lights flickering weakly through the dimming light. Beside it, a lone figure, a woman, older, wrapped in a long coat, waved a white handkerchief. Elijah's grip tightened. People didn't just get lost out here. Willow Creek wasn't a town for passing through. And that car, it didn't belong. The kind of machine that cost more than most folks made in a year. The kind that didn't break down in places like this unless someone had made a wrong turn, or unless someone had been sent a message. He lowered his altitude, circling once. White lady. Expensive clothes. Out in the middle of nowhere. He knew how this looked. How it would look when someone came asking. He'd seen that movie before, and it never ended well for the black man in the scene. He could already hear the questions, the ones that always had an edge no matter how polite they sounded. What were you doing out there? Did she seem afraid? Did she ask for your help? His better judgment told him to fly on. Not his problem. But then he saw the way she staggered, the way her hand clutched at her chest for just a second before she steadied herself. Something wasn't right. Elijah cursed under his breath. God damn it. He banked left, bringing the Piper Pawnee down over the damp field, eyes locked on the road. The ground was soft from earlier rain, not ideal but manageable. The wheels hit the earth with a jolt, skidding slightly before the plane settled, the familiar scent of churned-up soil filling the cockpit. He cut the engine. Silence, except for the wind pushing through the cane fields. The woman had gone still, her shoulders squared, but there was something stiff in the way she held herself, like she wasn't sure whether to be relieved or afraid. Elijah climbed down from the cockpit, boots sinking into the damp earth, and took slow, measured steps toward her, the way a man did when he knew his presence alone could be taken the wrong way. She tensed as he got closer. Just a flicker, a brief hesitation in her posture, but he saw it. He always saw it. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice steady, even. "You all right?" She blinked, then seemed to catch herself. "My car, it just stopped. I was trying to get to Belmont Air Force Base." Her voice was clipped, precise. Money in every syllable. Belmont, 100 miles north, well past the storm front. "You call anyone?" She shook her head. "No service." Of course not. No signal out here on a good day, let alone before a storm. She was soaking wet, shaking slightly, but there was something else, pride maybe. Like she wasn't used to needing help, like she was about to tell him she could figure it out herself. Elijah sighed, glancing at the car, popped the hood. She hesitated just a second too long. He recognized that pause, that flicker of doubt, the moment of calculation. Could she trust him? Was he safe? The way white folks always hesitated when a black man got too close. But finally she nodded. Elijah exhaled, wiping the rain from his brow. Let's get this over with. The moment Elijah made his decision, it settled deep in his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. His fingers tightened around the control stick as he scanned the land below, searching for a solid stretch to put the plane down. It wasn't ideal hell. It was risky, but he'd landed in worse. The dirt road was too narrow, too uneven. The field beside it was better, the grass short from the recent harvest, but the rain had turned the earth soft. If his wheels sank too deep, getting back in the air wouldn't be easy. He exhaled sharply, banking the Piper Pawnee into a slow descent. The wind shoved at the plane, jerking it sideways, but Elijah knew how to fight the sky when it fought back. He corrected, adjusted, held steady. The ground came fast, the rain turning everything into a hazy blur. Thump, thump. The wheels hit earth, skidding slightly before settling. He flexed his fingers, feeling the pulse hammering in his throat. Through the cockpit window, he saw the woman head snapping up, eyes wide with something between relief and alarm. She took a step forward, then hesitated, gripping her coat tighter like it could shield her from more than the storm. Elijah cut the engine, and suddenly, the rain hitting metal was the loudest sound in the world. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he climbed down, boots sinking into damp earth, his breath steady but deep. The air felt charged, like the storm had left something behind, something heavy. The woman hesitated. Eyes flicking to his face, then to the plane, then back again. He saw it, the brief flicker of doubt in her expression, the hesitation that had nothing to do with the storm and everything to do with him. He had seen that look before. The quick calculation, the silent question. Is he safe? It was the same look he'd gotten in stores, on sidewalks, in places where people like her weren't used to standing too close to people like him. He knew what came next, the polite, cautious distance, the carefully measured words. Elijah wiped the rain from his face with the back of his hand, keeping his voice even. "Mom, you all right?" She blinked, like she'd momentarily forgotten how she got here. "My car." Her voice was hoarse, barely audible over the wind. She cleared her throat. "It died. I was trying to get to Belmont Air Force Base." Belmont. That was at least 100 miles north, past the worst of the storm. No way in hell she was making it there on her own tonight. "You call anyone?" She shook her head. "No service." Of course not. Cell reception out here was garbage. On a night like this, with the storm wrecking the towers, she might as well have been stranded in another century. She was soaked through, trembling slightly, but there was something else, something rigid in the way she held herself, like she wasn't used to needing help, like she sure as hell wasn't comfortable accepting it. Elijah sighed, glancing at the Mercedes. The car looked untouched, not a scratch on it, gleaming even under the storm-gray sky. Didn't belong on a road like this. Didn't belong out here with him. "You got anyone you can call? Someone at the base?" She hesitated. A strange pause, like she was debating whether to tell him something. Then she shook her head again. "I just need my car started. If you could help with that, I'd appreciate it." Elijah exhaled slowly. So that was it. She wasn't asking for a ride. Hell, she didn't even want him standing here. He could feel the shift in the conversation, the same shift he always felt in moments like this. Maybe she was just wary of strangers. Maybe it was something else. But he could sense the invisible line between them, the one she wasn't sure she wanted him to cross. He had two choices. Walk away. Let her figure it out. Let the night swallow her problems whole. Or help anyway, knowing damn well that when it was over, she'd still probably lock her car doors if he walked too close. His father's voice echoed in his head. "Do the right thing, even when it ain't easy." Elijah pinched the bridge of his nose, then nodded toward the car. Popped the hood. She hesitated just a second too long. Then, finally, she turned, her heels sinking into the mud as she moved. Elijah followed, rain slipping beneath his collar, the cold biting sharper than it had a minute ago. The alternator was shot. He cursed under his breath. "Can you fix it?" she asked, voice tight. "Not here. Not in this weather. You're not driving anywhere tonight." She went still, lips pressing into a thin line, her jaw tight in a way he recognized. She was calculating again, running through the options she didn't have. "I can call a tow in the morning," he said, voice steady. "You can stay at my place tonight. It's dry. It's warm. My wife's got extra blankets." She flinched like she wanted to protest, like she was on the verge of saying something sharp. Then, just as quickly, she swallowed it down. "I don't want to be a bother," she muttered. Elijah let out a short, humorless laugh. "Lady, you already are, but I ain't about to leave you out here." She looked at him, then back at the car, then back at him again, her hands tightening around the edges of her coat. It took her too long to nod. Too long for it to mean anything. "Fine," she said, the word barely audible. Elijah jerked his chin toward the plane. "Come on." Her eyebrows pulled together. "You mean?" "You're not getting to my house in that thing," Elijah said, nodding toward the car. "I'll come back for it later with my truck. But right now we gotta go." She hesitated, of course. She did, then finally nodded, following him through the rain. Elijah climbed back into the cockpit, flipping switches, warming the engine, the soft whir of the propeller slicing through the storm's howl. He kept his eyes forward, not looking at the woman beside him as she strapped herself in. For the first time that night, she seemed genuinely nervous. "You ever flown in a plane like this before?" he asked. "No." "Good," he smirked, adjusting the throttle. "Hold on to something." And with that, the Piper Pawnee lurched forward through the rain, wheels kicking up mud as it fought for lift. The wind shoved against them, the weight of the storm still lingering in the air. The hesitation in the controls sent a brief flicker of doubt through Elijah's mind, the wet earth threatening to pull them back down. But then they were airborne, leaving the stranded Mercedes behind, swallowed by the storm. The Piper Pawnee cut through the last breaths of the storm, rising over darkened fields, its engine steady against the dying wind. Elijah kept his grip firm on the controls, body leaning slightly with every shift, every pull, the way a man did when the sky tried to fight him. He'd flown through worse, but the weight of a passenger beside him added a different kind of tension. A plane like this. It wasn't built for comfort, and she sure as hell didn't look like someone used to discomfort. He caught a glimpse of her out of the corner of his eye hands, gripping the seat like a lifeline, knuckles white, lips pressed into a thin line. She was tense, stiff in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. Probably never been in a single-engine crop duster before. Definitely never taken off from a muddy field in the middle of nowhere. "Elijah Carter," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the hum of the engine. She blinked like she'd forgotten he was there. "What?" "That's my name," he said. "Figure if you're going to trust me to keep us in the air, you might as well know it." She hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Evelyn. Evelyn Harrington." He already knew. Or at least he knew her type. Name like that, clothes like that, voice clipped and deliberate like she'd spent her life making sure she was heard. She came from money. From power. He'd spent a lifetime watching people like her make decisions that people like him had to live with. He didn't say anything, just nodded, eyes locked on the horizon. The farmhouse was up ahead, its porch light glowing soft against the dark. His wife, Marcia, would be waiting probably on the porch, arms crossed, already demanding answers before he even cut the damn engine. The landing was smoother than the takeoff, though the wheels skidded slightly on the damp earth before settling. Elijah exhaled, shutting the engine down, the sudden silence thick between them. Neither of them moved. Then Evelyn unbuckled herself, stiff like she still wasn't sure she trusted the ground beneath her. Elijah climbed out first, offering a hand out of habit, but she hesitated before taking it, fingers cold against his calloused palm. He didn't react, just let go the second she was steady. The farmhouse was a short walk from the landing strip, its warm light cutting through the thick southern dark. Sure enough, Marcia stood waiting, arms folded, framed by the doorway. Barefoot, wearing one of those old, oversized shirts she always threw on before bed, but her stance made it clear sleep wasn't happening anytime soon. "Elijah Carter," she called as they approached. "I swear to God, if you tell me you just dragged some poor woman out of the storm in that damn plane." "Wasn't gonna leave her there," he interrupted, shaking the water from his sleeves. Marcia's gaze flicked past him, landing on Evelyn, taking her in all at once, the soaked clothes, the tight shoulders, the exhaustion in her face. Something shifted in her expression. "Well, get inside before I all freeze to death," she muttered, stepping aside. Evelyn hesitated, just long enough for Elijah to notice. Like she wasn't sure about stepping over that threshold. He didn't push her. Just followed Marcia inside, knowing damn well that once his wife decided to take someone in, they were getting fed whether they liked it or not. The warmth of the house wrapped around them, the scent of coffee hanging in the air. Marcia was already moving, pulling a towel from the cabinet, disappearing into the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had already made up her mind about handling this her way. "You're lucky," she called over her shoulder. "If you'd come through an hour later, you'd be stuck eating leftovers from last week. Sit. I'll heat up something decent." Evelyn hovered near the doorway, coat dripping onto the wooden floor. Elijah nodded toward the worn-out couch near the fireplace. "Go on. Take a seat." She did, carefully, like she was afraid she might break something. He didn't blame her. This wasn't the kind of house she was used to. The furniture was old but sturdy, the walls lined with photos of a life lived in one place, in one small corner of the world. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but it was real. Marcia returned with a steaming mug, setting it down in front of Evelyn with a quiet thunk. "Coffee. Won't fix everything, but it's a start." Evelyn wrapped her hands around it, inhaling the warmth like she hadn't been able to breathe properly in hours. For a long moment no one spoke. Then, finally, she exhaled, her voice quieter than before. "Thank you." Marcia waved a hand. "Ain't nothing. Now, let's figure out how to get you where you need to be." Elijah leaned back against the counter, watching as Evelyn's shoulders tensed again. That hesitation. The same one from earlier, back on the road. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about a broken car. And he had a feeling he was about to find out why. Elijah leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching as Evelyn wrapped her hands around the coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. The hesitation in her shoulders, the way her eyes stayed locked on the dark liquid inside she was holding something back. He'd seen that kind of silence before, the kind that stretched tight over something heavy. Something too big to be said out loud without breaking apart. Marcia, ever patient, sat down across from her, fingers tapping lightly against the table. "All right, Mrs. Harrington, let's cut to it. You were out in the middle of nowhere in a storm, heading to Belmont Air Force Base. That don't sound like just a wrong turn." Evelyn flinched slightly at the sound of her own name, like she wasn't used to hearing it spoken here. In a house like this, by people like them. She lifted the mug to her lips, took a slow sip, stalling. "I needed to be there tonight," she said finally, her voice softer now, almost tired. "My son Marcus is being promoted. They're making him a general." Marcia let out a low whistle. "Well, damn. That's something." Elijah didn't react. He had already figured it was something big. People like Evelyn Harrington didn't get stranded on dirt roads in the middle of the night unless they were running towards something important or running out of time. Evelyn set the mug down carefully, fingers lingering on the rim. "I never told him I was coming. He doesn't know I'm here." Marcia raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Silence again. Then a breath, shaky this time. "Because I just found out I don't have much time left." The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Elijah's jaw tightened. Marcia's expression softened. "What do you mean?" Evelyn swallowed, her gaze distant, like she was somewhere else entirely. "I got the results last week. My heart. It's failing. There's nothing they can do." She blinked hard, pressing her lips together. I thought I had more time. I thought I'd be able to tell him later, after tonight, after the ceremony. But when I got the call, when I heard he was finally getting the recognition he deserved, she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. I realized I couldn't wait. I had to be there. I had to see it just once before. Her voice caught, and she stopped herself, fingers tightening around the mug until her knuckles went white. Marcia reached out instinctively, placing a hand over hers, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry." Evelyn blinked rapidly, nodding, as if trying to hold herself together by sheer force of will. Elijah exhaled through his nose, staring at the floor. The words sat heavy in his chest, pressing against something raw. His own mother had been sick for months before she told him. By the time she did, it was already too late to change anything, too late to say what needed to be said. He had told himself for years that it wasn't his fault, that there was nothing he could have done. But the regret still sat in the back of his mind, quiet and constant. And now here was this woman, sitting in his kitchen, carrying the same kind of weight, trying to outrun time the same way his mother had. He inhaled sharply, pushing off the counter. "You're not getting to Belmont by car." Evelyn looked up at him, startled. I know. I just thought if I could get my car running." "You wouldn't have made it," he said flatly. "Not in this weather. Not in time." Her eyes searched his face, the realization settling in. He clenched his jaw, warring with himself. He didn't owe her this. He didn't owe her a damn thing. But he knew what regret felt like, and he wasn't about to let someone else carry it if he could help it. He turned to Marcia, who was already watching him like she knew exactly what he was about to do. "You still got my flight bag packed?" Marcia gave him a long look, then nodded. "In the closet." Evelyn sat up straighter. "What are you saying?" Elijah met her gaze. "I'm saying we're flying to Belmont." For the first time since she'd walked into his home, the ice in her expression cracked, just a little. "You'd do that?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elijah shrugged, heading for the door. "Ain't about you, lady. It's about what you'd regret if you didn't go." And without another word, he grabbed his coat and disappeared into the rain. Elijah barely heard the door slam behind him as he stepped out into the rain. The air was thick with the lingering weight of Evelyn's words, but he pushed it aside, moving with the kind of certainty that came when a man knew what had to be done. He crossed the yard in long strides, the muddy ground sucking at his boots as he headed straight for the Piper Pawnee. The rain had let up some, but the winds still carried the remnants of the storm, gusting through the open fields, rustling the trees that lined the property. He'd flown in worse, but tonight wasn't about skill. Tonight was about time. The farmhouse door creaked open behind him, and he heard Marcia's voice, steady but laced with something that almost sounded like resignation. "You sure about this?" Elijah didn't turn. He just climbed onto the wing, unfastening the straps that held the cover over the cockpit. "She won't make it otherwise." A pause. Then the soft sound of footsteps as Marcia came closer. He could feel her gaze on him, the weight of years spent knowing each other, knowing how his mind worked. She didn't argue, didn't try to stop him. She never had, even when she probably should have. Instead, she sighed, rubbing her arms against the cold. "I put your flight bag by the seat." He nodded, appreciating that she already knew what he needed before he even asked. Behind them, Evelyn stood uncertainly on the porch, her coat now dry but still clutched tight around her, as if she could hold herself together with just fabric. She looked out at the small plane, then at Elijah, something hesitant in her posture. "Are you sure it's safe?" she asked. Elijah huffed a short laugh, shaking his head as he checked the fuel gauge. "Lady, you're asking the wrong questions. Ain't about safe, it's about whether or not you're coming." Evelyn hesitated just long enough for him to know she was still weighing the risk, still calculating whether trusting him was her best option. But then, with a sharp inhale, she stepped off the porch, moving toward the plane with a determination that hadn't been there before. Marcia handed her a scarf before she climbed in. "Gets cold up there." Evelyn took it without a word, her fingers brushing over the soft fabric before she tied it around her neck. Elijah didn't wait for her to settle. He was already climbing into the cockpit, flipping switches, feeling the familiar hum of the engine coming to life beneath his hands. The runway wasn't a runway, just a long stretch of packed dirt that had been flattened over the years from takeoffs and landings. But it was enough. It had always been enough. He pushed the throttle forward. The plane lurched, the wheels skimming over the uneven ground, bouncing once, twice then they were airborne. Evelyn gasped beside him, gripping the seat, her knuckles white. Elijah smirked. "Told you to hold on to something." She didn't respond, too busy looking out the window, watching as the farmhouse shrank beneath them, swallowed by the night. The storm behind, the mission ahead. They climbed higher, the turbulence rocking them slightly as the last of the storm faded into the distance. The world stretched out below them, darkened fields, winding roads, the occasional glow of a distant porch light. The sky above was vast and endless, a deep inky black speckled with stars, interrupted only by the occasional wisp of cloud. For a while neither of them spoke. The only sound was the steady drone of the engine, the rhythmic hum of the old machine that had carried Elijah through more seasons, more harvests, more storms than he could count. Then, finally, Evelyn spoke. "How long will it take?" Little under an hour, Elijah said, adjusting the altitude slightly. She nodded, then hesitated before adding, "You didn't have to do this." Elijah exhaled slowly, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "Yeah, I did." Silence again. But this time it was different, less heavy. Then, the radio crackled to life. Unidentified aircraft approaching Belmont restricted airspace. Transmit identification immediately. Elijah's stomach clenched. He had expected this, but not this soon. He grabbed the radio, keeping his voice calm. "This is Piper Pawnee, civilian aircraft, en route on a humanitarian flight." A pause. Then a second voice, sharper, more authoritative. "Civilian aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Alter course immediately, or we will be forced to respond." Evelyn stiffened beside him. "What does that mean?" "It means," Elijah muttered, eyes scanning the darkness ahead, "they don't like surprises." And then, out of nowhere, a shadow streaked past their left wing, fast and deadly. Elijah barely had time to react before another dark shape emerged from the night, keeping pace with them on the right. Fighter jets. F-22s. His breath came slow and measured. He had dreamed of flying one of those once. Now they were hunting him. The radio crackled again. "Piper Pawnee, you are in violation of airspace protocol. This is your final warning. Alter course now." Evelyn gripped his arm, her voice tight with panic. "Elijah." He ignored her, grabbed the radio again. "Listen, I got a passenger here, Evelyn Harrington. She's trying to reach her son." Another pause, but this one was longer, more uncertain. Then the voice returned, colder than before. "That is not an authorized clearance. You have 30 seconds to alter course or we will engage." Evelyn paled. "Engage? As in?" "As in they shoot us out of the damned sky," Elijah muttered, his hands tightening around the controls. He wasn't fast enough to outrun a jet, wasn't stupid enough to try. Evelyn fumbled for the spare headset, voice shaking as she keyed into the frequency. "This is Evelyn Harrington. My son, General Marcus Harrington, is expecting me. Please, let us through." Silence. Then, "Mom?" The voice was different this time. Strong, commanding, but underneath it there was something else. Something cracking. Evelyn's breath hitched. Marcus. Another beat of silence. Then the jets flanking them peeled away, banking hard, shifting position. And just like that, they weren't being threatened anymore. They were being escorted. Elijah exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his chest loosen just a fraction. He didn't look at Evelyn, but he could hear it in her breath, the way it shook slightly, the way her hand trembled as she wiped at her eyes. She had made it. The hardest part was over. Or at least, he thought it was. Because as they approached Belmont, the runway lights illuminating the base below, he saw what was waiting for them on the ground. A full honor guard, and standing at the center of it all a man in uniform, shoulders squared, his face unreadable. General Marcus Harrington, waiting for his mother, waiting for an explanation. And Elijah had the distinct feeling that this night was far from over. The Piper Pawnee touched down with a smoothness that betrayed the tension coursing through Elijah's body. His hands were steady on the controls, his breathing even, but his pulse hammered in his ears. As they rolled to a stop, the reality of where they were settled over him like a weight. This wasn't his field back home. This wasn't some quiet back road where no one asked questions. This was Belmont Air Force Base, and they weren't just expected, they were being watched. The honor guard stood in rigid formation, their dress uniforms crisp under the floodlights. High-ranking officers gathered just beyond them, their polished boots glinting against the tarmac. But Elijah's focus was locked on one man, the broad-shouldered figure standing at the center of it all. General Marcus Harrington. He was still. Too still. Hands clasped behind his back, chin lifted in that rigid, disciplined way military men carried themselves. But his eyes were locked onto the small, unassuming plane in front of him, and there was something in them that didn't match the rest of his stoic exterior. Something tight. Something breaking. Beside Elijah, Evelyn barely moved. She had been composed the entire flight, but now she seemed almost afraid to reach for the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfastened the belt. He could see the way her throat worked as she swallowed hard, as if she were trying to find the right words before she even set foot on the ground. But there were no right words for a moment like this. Elijah climbed out first, boots hitting the pavement, the humid night air thick around him. He moved with the same quiet steadiness that had carried him through every storm in his life. He wasn't military, didn't belong here, but for some reason he had been the one to bring her here. And now, there was nothing left for him to do except step back and let them face each other. Evelyn hesitated only a moment longer before she followed, her steps slow but deliberate as she descended onto the tarmac. The weight of eyes on her was almost palpable, but she didn't acknowledge them. Her world had shrunk to the man standing a few feet away. For a long time, Marcus didn't move. His jaw flexed. His eyes flickered not just with confusion, but with something raw, something deeper. Then, with a sharp exhale, he took a step forward, his composure cracking just enough for the words to escape. "Mom?" Evelyn inhaled sharply. For all the rank, all the power, all the steel in Marcus Harrington's voice when he had spoken over the radio, he suddenly sounded like nothing more than a son who had not expected to see his mother standing in front of him tonight. She let out a shaky breath, a laugh that wasn't really a laugh, just a sound of relief. "I made it." Marcus's eyes swept over her, as if checking for something wrong, something broken, something he had missed. Then, before she could say anything else, he closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. She let out a quiet gasp against his shoulder, but then she held on to him like she might never get another chance. And maybe she wouldn't. Maybe that was the thing that had driven her here through a storm, past every hesitation, past the fear of the unknown, the knowledge that there was no more time to waste. The silence stretched, thick with things unsaid. When Marcus finally pulled back, there was a tension in his face that hadn't been there before. "You should have told me." Evelyn wiped at her eyes, nodding. "I know." His gaze flickered briefly past her, to the small, beat-up crop duster that had delivered her here, then to Elijah. Elijah met his eyes, already preparing for whatever was coming. He'd been glared at by men with far less authority and far worse intentions. But Marcus only exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "You flew her here, through restricted airspace." Elijah shrugged, adjusting his cap. "Figured it was quicker than a tow truck." For a moment there was silence. Then one of the F-22 pilots who had intercepted them earlier stepped closer, helmet tucked under his arm. "Sir, you should have seen it. He handled those crosswinds better than some of our guys in training." Elijah smirked, just a little. "Spent my whole life dodging trees and barns. Your jets are a lot easier to work around." A laugh rippled through the gathered officers, just enough to break the tension. Marcus looked at his mother again, something softer in his gaze now, something grateful and weary all at once. Then, finally, he turned back to Elijah, reaching out his hand. "Thank you." Elijah studied him for a moment, then took his hand, giving it a firm shake. "Just did what needed doing," he said simply. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, not a lot of people would have." Elijah didn't answer that, just released his grip and took a step back, letting them have their moment. He had done what he came to do. The rest was up to them. Later, as the ceremony wrapped up and the crowd thinned, someone found Elijah near the hangars, looking up at one of the parked F-22s. "You ever been inside one?" He turned to see Marcus standing beside him, arms crossed. Elijah huffed a small laugh. "Nah, had a different flight path." Marcus studied him for a beat, then jerked his head toward the jet. "Come on." Elijah frowned. "What, you giving tours now?" Marcus just smirked. "Let's just say I owe you one." Elijah hesitated for half a second before following him. The 2 men stepped up onto the platform, and for the first time, Elijah looked down into the cockpit of a fighter jet instead of up at it. He ran a hand over the edge of the seat, taking in the countless dials, the sleek black panels, the raw power contained within the machine. He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Damn!" Marcus leaned against the frame. "Different from a crop duster, huh?" Elijah chuckled. "Yeah. A bit more paperwork, I imagine." Marcus laughed, shaking his head. They stood there for a while, looking at the aircraft, looking at the sky. And for the first time, Elijah didn't feel like he was outside looking in. The next morning, Elijah took off just after sunrise, the Piper Pawnee cutting through the golden light, heading back toward home. As he flew, he thought about the photos being taken at the base, the stories that would be told. Maybe one day, his grandkids would ask about the night their grandfather flew with fighter jets. Maybe he'd tell them. Maybe he'd just smile. And maybe, somewhere in Willow Creek, a framed picture would hang on his wall, a small, old crop duster sitting among some of the fastest, deadliest machines in the world. Proof that, for one night in the right moment, even the smallest plane could fly with giants. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.